evening. I'm Vidya Shah, your host for today, and welcome to our next edition of the Be Unlimited series of 2020. Today's webinar focuses on an important topic: breaking barriers, breaking norms. In discussion with change makers, we have an eclectic mix of panelists today. For Edelweiss, Be Unlimited is more than a positioning statement. It's a philosophy, a promise embedded at the very core of what we do and how we do it. Be Unlimited is going beyond incremental gains and incremental effort, but is more an aspiration towards surmounting one's limitations and reaching for the stars. It is going beyond limitations of time, gender, finances, or geography. The session this time is truly close to our hearts and embodies everything that we believe in about being unlimited. We have a panel of change makers who have gone beyond limitations and are true heroes of our society. These change makers have made huge strides and reinvented norms, whether it is transformative and innovative children's education model, harnessing solar energy for sustainable use, or rising to the occasion with path-breaking COVID relief measures. So without further ado, let me introduce our guests this evening. We have with us Ramji Raghavan, the founder and chairperson of Agastya International Foundation. In 1998, Ramji quit his job as director and strategic advisory board member of a global financial services company in London to create Agastya, a transformative and innovative education charity that has become one of the world's largest creative hands-on science and innovation learning. This program for underprivileged children and government school teachers operates with a fleet of 200 plus mobile science labs, 95 science centers, 80 lab on bikes, 400 Operation Vasanta night village schools, and a 172-acre campus creativity lab near Bangalore, featuring 15 unique experiential labs, including the Ramanujam Math Park, ranked among the top 15 math museums in the world. Agastya has reached creative hands-on science, art, innovation, and blended online hands-on learning to over 14 million children and 250,000 teachers across 21 states in India. Ramji has also served as a member of India's Central Advisory Board of Education and the Prime Minister's National Knowledge Commission. Our second panelist is Dr. Ranga, who is the founder of Thrive and One Child, One Light. He has an MBA and PhD in Information Systems and was a Takemi Fellow in Harvard School of Public Health, Boston. He founded Thrive in 2001 and a commercial company, Thrive Solar Energy, and pioneered the development and deployment of low-cost, portable solar LED home lights in India, Africa, and Latin America. So far, Dr. Ranga and his team have reached 3.5 million poor homes with their solar lights and continue doing 2 million every year. Dr. Ranga has founded a trust, One Child, One Light, to utilize the CSR funds of corporates and Thrive Energy's profits to help a child with solar study light. He received World Bank's Development Marketplace Award, Lighting Africa Award, Government of India's annual Solar Awards for developing and spreading solar systems. And our third esteemed panelist is Srini Swaminathan, who's an educator and consultant in the social development sector. 10 years ago, he quit his international career in Australia and returned to India to join the Teach for India Fellowship in Dharavi, Mumbai. His Dharavi classroom was featured by Tim Cook, Apple's CEO, in a worldwide video. He was the founding city director of Teach for India in Chennai and also one among the 12 Shravning Gurukul scholars at the London School of Economics. During the past 9 years, Srini has raised more than 10 lakhs for various causes by running 28 full marathons and long distance cycling events, including Kashmir to Kanyakumari and Bhuj in Gujarat to Guwahati in Assam. During COVID-19 migrant crisis, Srini has raised more than 45 lakh rupees to provide food and water to more than 145,000 interstate migrants. And in recognition of this, he was chosen as one of the COVID scholars of India, or COVID soldiers of India, I'm sorry, by Better India. So thank you all for joining us. And without further ado, let's get started. I'd like to ask Ramji first, you were a board member of a global financial services firm, and you went on to set up a highly innovative children's education model, which has impacted so many million lives. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, sure. So, I had this, I suppose from a young age, the desire to live in a very creative environment. And gradually I thought about, the idea of Shangri-La, a sort of school for creative children in the foothills of the Himalayas. And as the years progressed, I went to London to do my MBA, and which is a very capitalistic institution, the London Business School. But I ended up talking to a guy from IIT called Swami, and we ended up having a lot of discussions about social change. And I began to read books on Che Guevara and Castro and so on. So all of a sudden, I got interested in social change. When I came back to India in the late 70s, I think it was 78, instead of applying for a job in an MNC, I said I'll go and work in Bihar for a social organization where Swami had been working. So I thought I'd join him. Unfortunately, one day he came to our home in Delhi and said he'd quit. And he was going to Nigeria because his social work didn't work there. And in fact, he had been threatened, all sorts of threats. He was trying to disintermediate the middlemen and all that. And that was that. And I didn't have the courage to kind of take it forward. So I dropped that and ended up with Citibank in India and then in Puerto Rico and New York. But I always had this sort of dream, like we all do when we're young and perhaps even later. And then when I moved to London, working, etc., it was all very interesting and of course, financially very rewarding. But I felt, it's like that old Pink Floyd song, hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way from time. And when I used to take the underground to work, I used to wonder if I was like everyone else, hanging on in quiet desperation. And then I had this dream and I said, well, I was then nearing 40. And I said, I should either do it or forget about it. And the sense was, you shouldn't have a regret. I took a sort of deathbed view of life. So I said, let's do it. And eventually it took a few years because it meant giving up a lot in terms of stability and income and all the things and then coming back to India after having worked abroad for about 20 years and studied abroad 20 years. And I took the leap and came back, and that was the beginning of Agastya.
Sorry, Ramji, could you tell us a little about the early days of Agastya as well? How you went about thinking about what you really wanted to do, and from idea to actual, to the, your initial idea to what actually ended up happening would be an interesting journey for people to know.
Sure. So that's a great question. So I had this vision of a school for creative kids. So it was in that sense a bit elitist. But I also had an idea, it wasn't mine, this came through discussions, of working with and through teachers to disseminate the spirit of creativity at a mass level. So I got a group of people together, my father, the former principal of Rishi Valley School, the former chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, principal of the Daly College in Indore, some business people, students, and we did a lot of brainstorming. And while I was talking about creativity, I hadn't pinned down what it meant in a practical sense. So it was a very powerful one-day brainstorming that we did at the ITPL in Bangalore. I still remember it vividly, and came to the conclusion that creative people, great problem solvers, innovators, have 4 or 5 qualities. One is they're very observant, you know, in terms of the eyes and ears and all their senses. They're very observant. The second is that there's a process of awareness in the brain as creative thoughts germinate. And you try and keep your biases and prejudices down when that is happening. The third thing is the spirit of discovery and experimentation, being very active. And the fourth was the ability to what they call today connect the dots, right? So it's called association. So somehow they make unusual connections. And the fifth was when they come up with a good idea, there's the sense of let's go and try and make it happen. So it's the application. So we said all of this is predicated on curiosity. Curiosity is the foundation. So we said, okay, hey, we think we have a model of creative behavior. The big question I asked the group was, can you learn this or is it innate? And Dr. Iyengar, who was the atomic energy person, said, look, I can't promise that I can turn you into a Ramanujan or an Einstein. But what I can do is if on the sort of creativity scale, you're at 0.5, let's say, we can certainly bring you up to 3 or 4. And if we did that at a mass level, you're talking about a 5, 8, or even 10x transformation. And if you did that at the mass level, then you'll bring about transformation. So that was the idea. And the sense was in India then, and probably still is now, Iyengar talked about the absence of what he called cause-effect thinking. We don't understand the consequences of our actions. You know, we can all relate to that very viscerally almost in today's COVID-19 crisis. It's all about cause and effect. And so he said, the West understood the importance of this 100 years ago, and they began to instill it through the education system. While Nehru talked about the scientific temper, we never really instilled it in the education system. We took a completely opposite top-down chalk and talk model, which actually oppresses the spirit of inquiry, not gives it, you know, expression. So we said, that's what we will do. And that should be the strategy. And that, I think, was and is a very powerful idea. And, you know, today when you look at the new national education policy, even the Prime Minister has said, fundamentally, it is about shifting from what to think to how to think. And this is the conclusion we came to 20 years ago. It's about how to think. And then we said, well, how would you go about doing it? And you could do it through storytelling or, you know, different means. And because I was surrounded by scientists and engineers, they persuaded me that let's do it through hands-on experiential learning, science learning. And so science became an important part of that, but it's only a medium, it's not the end. The end is curiosity, creativity, and importantly, confidence. So that's how the sort of software of the approach came into being.
Thanks, Ramji. We'll come and talk a lot more about you know, all the lovely things that you do at Agastya, and also particularly how your work has been during COVID. But I'd like to also talk to Dr. Ranga and ask him to share a little bit of his journey, you know, going from the Harvard School of Public Health to lighting up over 3.5 million homes and continuing to do, you know, a remarkable number of, you know, homes and work in solar over the last so many years. So I'd love for you to talk about your journey, Dr. Ranga.
Thank you. Thank you, Vijayji. Um, I mean, I'm lost in listening to Ramji, so I had to recollect my thinking now. It happened gradually. It happened gradually. Um, I'm actually an MBA. Then going into public health is itself a shift, and then moving to education in one of my last assignments in the World Bank in Afghanistan. That made me think because you are very few experts who can go to the field. No, field means villages, small towns, are going to be a guest to many of your employees, friends. So then I saw the absence of lighting. Children cannot study. Mothers cannot cook. Actually, I'm from India and I'm used to this, but it never occurred to me all this. Only when you are in Afghanistan, you see them differently from a different perspective. So I also found several lights there, which are expensive. In those days itself, 3,000 rupees, which is almost a month's salary for that time, some of the staff there. So I thought I can make something tiny. So I heard Ramji, so I'm used to tweaking and working with electronics a little bit, not a lot. So by then I was using LEDs for just lighting myself, not doing any good things. So I tweaked and made a small study light, a gooseneck light, which looked like a small plate or a spoon or things together. Then I showed it to others. They liked it. When we done the casting, it is coming less than 1,000 rupees. Today we make lights for even 100 rupees. That time it was 1,000 rupees story. Yeah. The technology, one of the questions that you want to put is technology. LED was 300 rupees that time. Now it is 60 paisa. Similarly, solar panels, that damn cheap. We never had lithium batteries that time. We have batteries. So electronics, integrated circuits are 10 rupees, 15 rupees, 20 rupees. So you can even make a light for 100 rupees, a kit for 100 rupees to, Ramji's children and the students. So it's all gradually happened. And, initially I was buying from others. I was asking others to make and paying them money. And then I found it's not working out. They don't supply you on time, especially you have a cyclone and you need lights in a week, right? You can't wait for 1 month. Or it can be even earthquake that time in those countries, I forgot. You need to be very quick and give a quality also. For these reasons, I thought I'm advised by mentors to start my own organization, quitting the regular consulting job. And I started, and slow as usual, you can guess all the stories are the same. Started very slow, and I got recognition, money, grant, orders. Honestly, growth is all funded by the well wishers. And then we from one light. Hari, can you show all the lights photo? One light slide, no, shows all the lights, tiny lights to several lights. No. Show, change it, change it, change it, change it. One more. That's it. So we can make so many lights. Only this screen has this many. Even for the other day, for this, returned migrants, we are starting a small solar assembly unit. We designed still a smaller light, which is asked by the local dairy. Yeah, you can quit the screen. You can quit the screen. So it happened very gradually, very slowly, utilizing the technology, funding, finance. So in the process, I must be happy to say, we went several times to the government of India, convinced them, and they started 1 crore solar lights to children project, and they almost supplied 1 crore children projects. Then, as we share in international platforms, a light for $5 was a dream then. Now we give it for $2. Several other entrepreneurs have come up, especially some lighting companies, made in China, but funded here, there, everywhere. So somewhere in 15 years, we see now lights, around 100 crore solar lights are made by people like me, or just normal entrepreneurs in China. The story is that long. Yes.
No, that's fascinating. But I think one of the things that seems to be different about what you did is, the way you went about doing it, and how you also created a company that manufactured these lights so that you could be assured of supply. but also that you used it as a way of, funding some of the work that you did for the poor and underprivileged companies, really using the profits of this enterprise to fund some of your work that you do for poor and underprivileged communities, and also probably raising other CSR money and grants, which is what you alluded to. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, honestly, unless someone funds, you can't make lights and do for yourself. However, frugal you are, running a company, importing something, doing some things, paying to developers, reaching out is an expenditure. Um, Many people supported me from Mumbai to Delhi. Whenever there is a cyclone, earthquake, sorry to say, that's not supposed to be treated as an opportunity. Then I get opportunity to supply. So even I developed a model, Assam floods when they come, Tamil Nadu, Andhra cyclones, West Bengal cyclones, and that's like that. So you have to rise to the occasion. Like organization like Save the Children, even for the Nepal earthquake, they funded enormously. Then you can improve your systems and reduce cost and a little bit of quality and all that. So it's a gradual process. Happened over 10 years. So now these things are damn common. The light is so common today, just like a mobile phone. It's part of a mobile phone now. So that's the reason I find the need to shift to growing plants, the Indian variety of
Right.
plants, maybe a crore
Right.
for the next 10 years in these villages. That's what.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Srini, you're up next. We'd love to,
Yeah.
I would think, among all of us. And you have had a fascinating journey from, being a Teach for India fellow, teaching in a school, to doing some really remarkable work in the midst of COVID. So could you talk to us first about your journey and, about COVID and, how you've seen these last few months in particular?
Sure. Thank you, Vidya. When I went to the Chennai Central Railway Station to serve our interstate guests, or migrants as they are called, it took me back to more than 30 years when myself and my mother, we moved from Coimbatore to Chennai looking for better economic opportunities. And, we could not reserve tickets and so on. So I just slept on the floor of the train on top of a cardboard sheet, So the Chennai Central Station has a very strong memory in my mind. Using that as an example, I want to share that in a sense, we are all migrants in India, whether it could be long-term migration for education, work, and other reasons, or it could be short-term migration. So one of the first things that I thought about is that there is no us and them, It is not like, oh, I am a citizen or I am a resident of Chennai and they are not. We are all us. So wouldn't I do the same help for my friends and family or relatives and others? I felt the same when the crisis was unfolding. So in the first two phases of the lockdown, we did not see much of these stories. But once the story started filling our social media feeds and newspapers and magazines, it really bothered me so much. I hear an echo. Do you hear an echo?
Yeah.
You can hear me clearly?
Yeah, now it's better. Yes.
Okay. So when I started seeing the pictures and videos of the, migrants all over India walking for hundreds and thousands of kilometers or even cycling, it really broke my heart. I was in the safety and comfort of my home with electricity, with a roof over my head. I could eat the food at any time I wanted and so on. But I started feeling, how can we allow something like this to happen in front of us? And the overwhelming question was, what will I do about it? Going back to your introduction about the Better India Award, I'm glad they said COVID soldier. and not go with the commander-in-chief or something else, because I do see myself as a field person. So in my last 10 years in the social sector, I love to be in the field, putting my eyes and ears and heart on the ground and learning from people who are the beneficiaries. So this effort that has gotten a lot of recognition, where we have served food and other essentials for more than 145,000 people, uh, is a collective community effort. So I would not want to take up undue space in that recognition. But what differentiated this effort from the usual flood relief or earthquake and other disaster relief is that I think 95% or maybe more of the people who supported this could not be on the ground, because of the pandemic and all the safety protocols and worries and so on. So I became the main channel or platform for people to come together. I would say my social media, Instagram and Twitter community became the main platform for people to come together and support. So quickly summarizing, like what happened was, in May, when I started seeing this, I could not sit at home and see the biggest humanitarian crisis we have all ever seen, and felt, okay, let me put together 100 kits from my own savings. So I've spent about 1.5 lakh from my savings for this. So I always like to walk the talk. So I put in some money, put together 100 kits, and I initially wanted to go to the highway, but a lot of people I know in the police force, they discourage me from going to the highway. Instead, go to the railway station. So that was a very important step. So I went to the railway station, and then I realized the scale of the problem. You know, how there is a Kabir ka doha that says, "Sajan sanehi bahut mile, sukh mein mile anek, vipati pare dukh baatiye, so lakhan mein ek." To celebrate and enjoy, a lot of people you can find, but who supports you during distress, that person is important. So I felt like we need to be there for them during the times of distress, not because they built our cities or built our metro and so on, just because they are as important to our country as we all are, and we need to support them in the moment of crisis. But that's when I realized the 100 food kits were not enough at all, because every train had about 1,500 to 1,700 passengers, and every day about 2 to 3 trains were leaving just Chennai alone. Overall, more than 92 trains left Chennai during the peak of the Shramik train system. So my mantra was pretty simple. It was show up consistently, share consistently on social media, honest, sincere stories from the field, and finally scale if you can. I think just showing up regularly and consistently and sharing what's happening on the ground took this whole Seva initiative from 100 on day one to 1,45,000 people served within less than 2 months. So I think it's just the coming together of people who really wanted to contribute that made a difference.
Speak also, Srini, to a little bit about your personal journey, because what made you decide to take the TFI fellowship, for instance, because I'm sure you had a choice of career in front of you. Why did you decide to take the TFI fellowship? And why did you decide to become a teacher and then set up TFI in Chennai?
So, I mean, the inspiration is, of course, my own childhood and my early life. And, when I look back at my childhood, I grew up in poverty, raised by my mother. She herself is a school dropout. And she would always instill in me and my brother this value that education is the only lifeline that's going to save you from, any future disasters, even if I am not there in your life. And she would say 2 things: educate yourself, try to come out of the cycle of poverty, and pay it forward. Help other children to break the cycle of poverty in your lifetime. Once you are in a stable place. And she would instill in that idea into me. So I worked hard, studied, and we moved to Chennai, and I got a government scholarship to do my college, engineering college. Then I finished that. Obviously, I wanted to make sure that my family is somewhat stable. So I worked very hard for a few years. But during my work, the first few years, I would support children to go to school, stay in school with donations, school fees and so on. But increasingly, that desire in me grew to do something on the ground. That's when I heard about Teach for India initiative, and it was very interesting because it was full-time teaching at the primary municipal schools or other government schools, and being a teacher I thought would expose me to what is broken and what is working in the Indian education system. And I felt education, women and education, women's livelihood and education are two causes that are very dear to me. Directly seeing my mother and what education did to me and my brother and my family's, life. So I said, okay, I'll start with education, and I became a Teach for India fellow. And I think that's the best decision I've ever made in my own life, for my own development and understanding of, okay, what works in India, what doesn't work in India. So once I did finish my 2-year fellowship, I wanted to, come back to Chennai and start the initiative here, simply because, again, I felt like I did not understand much about Tamil Nadu system and what could I do for the children of Tamil Nadu, because I'm from here. I understand things here much better than, say, in Maharashtra. So I came back here and started the Teach for India fellowship system in Chennai. So then I was also thinking about scale, for my own development. Okay, how can I mean, because I was serving about 42 children in Dharavi. And in my mind, it was, okay, how can I serve thousands of children in my home state? So that's when I moved back to Chennai and started it here. But after a few years, I started feeling I want to learn and grow more by learning about the many other nonprofit initiatives in India who are working on various sectors like women's livelihood, education, and, for example, handicrafts and energy, which Dr. Ranga talked about. So one of the organizations I've been working with for the last 5 years is called Barefoot College in Rajasthan, where I actually do work on the night school initiative in various villages, and solar energy, and handicraft and women's livelihood. So, being an independent consultant has helped me serve various initiatives within the same organization.
Yeah, thanks, Srini. I think you should definitely take time later to chat with Ramji and Dr. because I'm sure there's a lot to learn for all of us from each other actually in this. And I know Agastya for a very long time, and I'm an insider in that sense. I also serve on Agastya's board. But Ramji, do tell us a little bit about how you moved from the concept of the campus to the mobile van, and therefore how it probably has served you well even in the times of COVID. So do tell us how you actually thought of scale in a very, very, very dramatically different way.
Yeah, so the first idea was a campus. And we managed to acquire about 170 acres of barren wasteland near Bangalore in a place called Gurivanka, which is in Andhra Pradesh. So that was a big coup. I was very excited. I should have known better as a former banker that it takes a lot of money to build all these things. And I thought people would just pour in the money, but not to be. There was no money, and I was living off my savings. And suddenly this land became an albatross around my neck, because I was then under pressure from the government saying, you acquired this land, albeit wasteland. Where are the buildings? And so we were desperate. So we did what we are very good at. We huddled and brainstormed. And Mahavir, managing trustee, myself, my father, we came up with the idea that while we wait for the money to build the buildings, can we take education to the school, education to the village? And we said, how about a mobile van and a mobile science van? And the Homi Bhabha Center gave us some low-cost science experiments to take. And we trained our tractor driver to be the first teacher. And he, was set loose in the villages. A few weeks went by. I asked him, Balram, how's it going? He said, they love it. Initially, they thought I was a missionary and they would run away. But then when they saw all this, they got excited and they said, wow. So I said, all right, keep doing it. Never thought of this, but it seems like a great idea. And then gradually it began to dawn on us that, hey, while we have this idea of an elite campus for very brilliant children, actually it's a lot of fun working with these village kids in a hands-on experiential way. So slowly we began to run some science fairs. And then I met Rakesh Jhunjhunwala. He was very impressed with the idea of a mobile van. He said, I will give you money to have, run 3 vans. So from 1, we grew to 3. And, I was changing my thinking. And I said, forget about the school. Actually, we wouldn't even know how to run a school. In fact, the former principal of Daly College said, running a school is more difficult than running a company. Because once things go down, it's very difficult to reverse. And there are many stakeholders involved. So be very careful what you're doing. And so then we said, forget about the school. And because the money was coming in, in bits and pieces, we began to build a little lab on campus and then another lab. And then we said, instead of a school, we'll create a school for schools. So that's what the campus evolved to. Then the mobile science van began to grow. The government of Karnataka read about it and called us. So we said, all right, if you can do the OPEX, then we'll try and find money for the CAPEX. And Rakesh was very kind and he helped us with the CAPEX for the vans. So the scaling started. But an important point here is right at the beginning, although our strategy had evolved, our desire to achieve scale was set in motion right at the beginning. And that's important for an organization because right in the early stages, we began to think in terms of scale. How can we reach 1 million, 10 million, 100 million in a powerful way, in an impactful way? And so that's how the whole evolution of this was driven. But as you get bigger, there's more scale, there's more people, you might lose focus. It happens to all organizations. In fact, a friend of mine calls it the exponential decay of vision that comes into place. So I was wondering, how can we simplify all this into a message that people can relate to? So when we scale, it's not difficult to achieve that scale. And this came from watching Balram, the tractor driver, former tractor driver. He was teaching some kids under a tree. And he asked them, do you believe what you see? And they said, yeah, we believe what we see, the leaves, the tree, the blue sky, the clouds and everything. And he said, okay. And he gave them a piece of paper and asked them to roll it up into like a little telescope and said, tell me what you see. So they were very excited and they said, yeah, we can see the tree, the leaves and so on. He said, okay, keep one eye closed and look. Now open both eyes, put your hand here and tell me what you see. And they couldn't believe it because they were now seeing through their hand. There was a hole in the hand and they couldn't believe it. And even I couldn't believe it. I'd never done this. And he said, but you said you believe what you see, but is there a hole in your hand? And clearly there wasn't a hole in the hand. So they were all now confused, but very excited. So that brought out 3 very profound messages about learning, which simplified the whole thing. The first is they did something hands-on experiential, which was counterintuitive. Okay? And so they went, the mind was awakened and they were stimulated. The second was they eventually found out why they were seeing that hole in their hand. It's about the way the message goes to the brain. And that's the famous aha effect. And the third is they were having a lot of fun doing it, which was ha-ha. So we said, look, the essence of what Agastya is doing and should continue to do is to stimulate the aha, and ha in children, teachers, and that's the essence of creative learning. And in fact, that's the essence of creative living. So that's how we evolved, and we were able to scale more easily because the message became easy for the frontline people to understand and implement.
That's always, I've heard this so many times from you, Ramji, but I've always I've always been fascinated by this particular story. How do you think Agastya has evolved in the midst of COVID, when we're very worried about children and how and their, especially poor children, and their access to education when schools are not really open? So what are the things that you've thought of to continue to support the children that you work with?
So a great question. Since we are a very hands-on physical institution, when the school closed, it meant we couldn't go to the schools, period. So everything came to a grinding halt. Fortunately, we'd been talking for a couple of years about evolving a digital strategy for Agastya. So the organization was ready and pivoted big time towards online digital education, but with a difference. And the difference is there are many people in the online digital field, obviously. What we said is we can't let go of the hands-on experiential learning for children and teachers, because that's at the core of what we do. But we can't do that. So we've got to create a blended model. So what we've done is we do a lot of online classes. However, we have managed to teach children how to view their home as a lab. So there are lots of everyday available materials that they can use to actually do experiments, including in the kitchen. It's a sea of chemistry there. So we've developed a lot of modules where the home becomes a laboratory. So children have started doing stuff at home, and it's supplemented with online education and digital. So it's becoming a new sort of blended learning model. And that's the big opportunity for us. Having said that, the majority of children don't have access to technology. So that's a big challenge. Now, in our case, some states like Gujarat and Karnataka and Haryana said, okay, we'll give you permission to take your mobile vans into the villages. And you run classes in the villages in a socially distanced way. So we're doing that. And the next thing we're doing is we're setting up smart TVs in villages where we can either beam lessons or run them offline. So these are some of the initiatives. But a very interesting COVID thing we're doing is we've just launched COVID-19 digital education modules, which are available for anyone to view and learn from. We launched a COVID-19 lab on a motorbike in North Karnataka, and this effort was funded by Kiran Mazumdar Shaw. And very soon we hope to launch a COVID-19 digital simulation game that anyone can play. So hopefully the pilot version is ready, and maybe in a month or month and a half, we should have this available. So, and what COVID-19 has done is we're now creating a new healthcare curriculum, because I believe healthcare is no great insight, but healthcare is going to become very important at school education. So that's another thing we're working on. And of course, we've done relief efforts and so on using our mobile labs.
Thanks so much, Ramji. Dr. Ranga, my question to you was that you have worked in Afghanistan, you worked in Bangladesh, you worked in Sri Lanka, worked in Nepal. How have your experiences there been, and what have you seen vis-a-vis what's happened there, vis-a-vis what's happening in India? And, how do you see the future of everything that you're doing? Where do you see?
Thank you. I put this question to myself several times. So we work most in Africa. They say it's better because of organization, country as such. I worked more in Uttar Pradesh. 15 years ago, hundreds of villages, they did not see light. Today, it's totally different, totally different. I think almost all, near 100% electricity, televisions running, 4G connection everywhere, everyone watching YouTube, and phenomenal change in terms of technology. I mean, technology gives access, knowledge, and ability to maybe buy things or use things, learn things. It's a dramatic change. Same in Africa. No? When you go first time to Africa, especially to Kenya, every one of us land in Kenya, I see the changes very, very, very rapidly. Every visit, I see the changes. So earlier they were buying anything from a local trader. Local trader can sell 2 to 3 times, 4 times more. Now they know the prices in AliExpress, Alibaba, anywhere, everywhere. Some of the countries I visited, like Botswana, was very small, poor country. After 10 years, I am supposed to visit. I mean, it became very rich. Suddenly, diamonds, Botswana diamonds, maybe, you may have connection. Uh, Similarly, small countries like Swaziland, Ghana, it's a happy feeling, very, very happy feeling. Forget about you being a champion. Everything is happening because of technology. I feel technology is a great democracy enabler, rather than theories or support or money or whatever. I mean, I just told you, the LED we were buying for 300 rupees, now 60 paisa. Maybe they can price it lower in your volume. Or the panel, solar panel, 1,000 rupees solar panel is 10 to 20, 50 rupees. Or I have a panel for, 5 rupees. The panel I put here cost me 5 rupees. And some epoxy resin of another 4, 5 rupees. It's unthinkable, no? So that's, in the COVID time, we are thinking, my mentor keeps guiding me, why can't we take a small manufacturing assembly to a village? Because village has everything, no? Especially in Andhra, Telangana, I'm sure, or maybe Karnataka, electricity, television. Television means you're connected, right? A mobile,
Right.
and then educated woman, returned, educated engineers even we have. Even an accountant we found suddenly in the village who knows tally, invoice, everything. So whatever I can do in a suburb of Hyderabad, I can do in any village of India, because now courier parcels sending from Hyderabad or places is as easy as doing in any other country. So then we should utilize. Then we should not congest the cities. We should not say we are here only, span it out like that. So that's the new thinking. Maybe 20, 30 manufacturing assembly centers, making tiny lights. We don't need them as in the main light, but you need them as emergency hand light to go everywhere, here, there, even kitchen or reading or bathroom. When you have floods in Hyderabad, I think 1/3 of Hyderabad was not having anything access to electricity. Even today, they say. So the product is, changing its primary use. It's now additional. Good, you can afford 200 rupees, so additional is okay. Can you buy 10,000 rupees phone just like that?
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah. Shri, you did so much work around the migrants and, really ensuring that their journey back home would be as comfortable as possible. How do you see this evolving? Now that they've gone back home, one of the biggest questions we're all asking is, how do they rebuild their lives? What is it in it? What is their, in their future? And how does philanthropy or the NGO sector, for example, come together to help in this rebuilding exercise?
Yeah. Vidya, before I got into the Shramik Seva work, I must admit that I did not know much about, our internal migrants who are in the lower income community, people who come for construction work, people who migrate from, say, for example, Bihar and Bengal, all the way to Tirupur and Coimbatore in Tamil Nadu for the weaving textile industry and so on. I would see them everywhere in the cities and towns, but I did not know much about it. So that says a lot about how internal migrants in the lower income sector are seen by people in the middle class or upper middle class communities. So I think all around India, with some exceptions like Kerala, there is a bit of a prejudiced or a negative perception of internal migrants in the lower income strata. So that is one thing that I've understood during the Seva initiative. The second thing I understood was that they are quite excluded in many ways in the host states, be it health, be it financially, or education and food. And in so many ways, they are not included. And that is the number one reason why at the first hint of a crisis, they wanted to get back home. On top of this, many states did not have reasonably decent data about the internal migrants, except probably Kerala. That's why they probably managed it better. And we also saw how the central government said they had no data about the migrants' deaths. So in life and death, there is no data about them. So I feel in the first step for their inclusion and acceptance and appreciation into our society, we need to have data about our migrants. Only then social security schemes and labor laws can be applied, and they can be included. I would talk to a lot of the Shramik passengers when I was offering them food, tea, say sanitary pads and toys. And one of the things they often said was, we did not feel like we belonged here. Our employers did not care for us or anything. They did not have health protection. Their children did not have education. And especially women and children were very, very vulnerable in this community. So I think, coming to your point, when I was serving them for the last 3-4 months, one thing I noticed was they're very big or high on self-reliance and dignity. I did not see any difference between me when I worked in Bombay or them when they come and work in Tamil Nadu. They want to be independent financially. They want to stand on their own feet and serve their families. So I think what is most important is, at one side, the government should start working on inclusion of our internal migrants. And I think there are a lot of reports and studies on this, and I'm like a nobody in this field, so I wouldn't want to comment. But I think while the government, state governments and central governments must focus on inclusion of internal migrants, what I can do as a citizen is, one, being aware about internal migrants in my own city or state, and then two, how can I support them and their businesses? There are a lot of migrant run businesses, could be small food, construction, whatever. How can we support them in any way we can? And I think these things have to go on in a multi-pronged approach for us to help them rebuild their lives. In a sense, like, we just need to support them, and they are more than capable of rebuilding their lives.
Thank you so much, Srini. That was just marvelous hearing it from you. I know we have just very few minutes left, and I just don't know how this hour almost passed, but just a quick question to all three of you, like in kind of closing, based on Ramji, Dr. Ranga, Srini, what would one or two of your learnings be that you'd like to share with the community that's listening in today? These are our clients at Edelweiss. These are people who are associated with Edelgeben in its many dimensions. And I'm sure there are a lot of young people listening in. So what would be the one or two life lessons, as it were, that you would give our audience today? Ramji, maybe you could start, and then we'll quickly go to Dr. Ranga and then close with Srini.
Well, from a personal point of view, do the stuff that you're scared to do.
Yeah.
Because I was very scared to take the plunge and think almost perversely and say, do what you're actually afraid to do. I'm not saying put your hand in a raging fire and watch yourself burn. No, but do things that you're afraid to do. Just take the plunge and worry about what happens later. The second thing I've learned is, I came from a corporate background where you think you can control variables. certainly in the social sphere, you can't control variables. So you've got to realize that the path from here to here is not a straight line. It's a zigzag. So obliquity is very important, that you should actually welcome uncertainty, take paths that appear to be not leading to the end you're seeking, but actually might be the best way to get there. So the second thing is about dealing with uncertainty and leveraging the principle of obliquity. Very important. The third thing which I learned, as people used to tell me when I was a banker, and passionate like most other bankers, that I was not connected to society. I was living in a very insular world, and I didn't know what that criticism actually meant. But then I realized when I took the plunge that indeed I was living in a very insular world. And while I might not be a Gandhi or a Krishnamurti or some great sage, certainly I began to connect a little bit more with my environment. I remember when I was in New York living as a bachelor, my father visited me once and he said, "Very good, I'm glad to see you're doing well. But if you don't mind my saying so, you're not in tune with the system." And I disagreed with him. But I can relate to, he's not alive now, but I can relate to what he said now in spades. I was not in tune with the system. I was not connected with society. So if there's any one lesson, another lesson I've learned, it's about being more deeply connected with society than I used to be, less insular, more porous, go with the flow, and think creatively. That's the lessons that I've learned.
Thanks, Ramji. That was
Excellent.
fantastic. Yeah. Dr. Ram.
Oh, thank you. Not like a message. I mean, Ramji summarized everything.
Yeah.
when you're going to do what you like to do, you may not miss what you think you are missing, right? I met more saints in my work, honestly, no? Spiritual leaders. No? You name from Brahma Kumaris to the almost like a poem. I met everyone. I met every politician you can think, except Mr. Modi, because he didn't need me in the way better. I worked with many great people. This is when you are doing something you like to do, or when you are doing for yourself or for others. God doesn't deny you things that you need or like. I mean, to say spiritually, he doesn't deny you. You get it. You get it. Let's say if I continued working in the United Nations for another few years, I would end and say, it's good. Their also service is good. But I freakily by accident bought some barren land, which is more than that.
Yeah.
Someone knows what to give, where to give. I thought I cannot fund my daughter's education because she wants to study law in the United States, IP law. Then she got a full scholarship. I don't need to pay, right?
Yeah.
Something like that happens. I'm now putting the pieces together. I didn't lose anything. Little bit, somebody says I lost, I shouldn't lose anything. Rather, I gained, gain. That's all.
Very nice.
Very nice. All the friends can feel the same. Yeah.
Srini, last word before we close.
Yeah, I think I would just say +1 to whatever Dr. Ramji said, because he literally summarized what I wanted to share. So, but if I just have to add a couple of points from my most recent experience, I would say never underestimate the power of just showing up, showing up consistently, and do not think about scale and, numbers right at the beginning. What is most important is being in the field, on the ground, showing up, number one. And number two, this is something that I've seen a lot in the social sector, that people, have a saying, oh, if your right hand gives, your left hand shouldn't know. I don't want to talk about what I do. I completely disagree. I think you show up, You serve sincerely, and please share. It could be a small act of help. It could be a big act. Doesn't matter. You just share, and you never know what that inspires. And I think my project or initiative was a great example of that. I'm a nobody. I'm not an influencer or a celebrity, but within 2 months, raising 45 lakhs, where not one person asked for an ATG certificate or anything else. The pure intention was to serve. So just show up, serve, and share.
Super, Srini. That was fantastic, and I'm mesmerized. I know we are a few minutes over time, but I thought I really wanted to hear from all of you, given all the work that you have done. It would have been injustice not to hear your learnings and your lessons for all of us. So it's been an immense pleasure to have all of you on board our platform this afternoon. We should close with Gandhi's words, who said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." So I hope our audience has enjoyed this session as much as I have. Thank you so much, all of you, for tuning in. Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists for joining us. And we look forward to having you all join us back again next month for another insightful session. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.